Welcome to From Stuck to Scaled, growth strategies for small and mid-sized businesses, your guide to navigating growth, transformation, and success in today's ever-changing business landscape. Each week, we'll dive into proven strategies, real-world case studies, and actionable insights designed to help small and mid-sized business owners scale smart, lead stronger, and grow faster. Let's get you unstuck and on the path to sustainable, scalable success. Now your host, Julio Gonzalez.
Welcome back to From Stuck to Scaled. I'm your host, Julio Gonzalez. For growing businesses and wealthy families, managing wealth isn't just about maximizing return. It's about strategy, protection, and navigating complexity, especially when you have assets on both sides of the US-Canada border. This landscape is full of pitfalls that can undermine even the best laid plans. Today, we're diving into how to move beyond simple accumulation to creating a truly effective and integrated wealth distribution plan. Let's get started. Joining us is Wayne Baxter, Senior Executive Manager at One Capital Management. Wayne specializes in advising wealthy families with U.S. or Canadian investment assets on how to grow, protect, and efficiently distribute wealth, blending expertise in capital markets, risk management, and complex cross-border tax considerations that having assets on both sides of the border brings. His personal story of moving to the U.S. as an entrepreneur and the challenges he faced are a testament to his tenacity. Wayne also hosts his own podcast as the host of the 3 Questions with Wayne Baxter podcast. Wayne, welcome to the show. Wayne, welcome to From Stuck to Scaled.
Great to see you again. Thanks a lot for having me on your show here. It's a big honor and looking forward to our conversation today.
Likewise. Tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and your background before we get into the topic of the show.
Sure, absolutely. Well, they say branding is everything, and I know you're a big believer of that. So what I call myself a cross-border financial advisor. And the reason for that is that the firm I'm with, One Capital Management, is uniquely set up in that they are licensed as a registered investment advisor here in the U.S. and a portfolio manager registrant in Canada. So, and I'm a Canadian. I'm from Canada, born and raised, immigrated to the United States 13 years ago, just over 13 years ago. And the reason I moved down here was to start a cross-border wealth management business. And so we are uniquely positioned in that we're able to advise clients in both Canada and the U.S. And if you want to get into the weeds a little bit, not only can we manage money in both countries, but also in both currencies. So we have clients in the United States here that have Canadian dollar denominated investment accounts. And we have clients in Canada, conversely, that have US dollar denominated accounts. And we provide them with investment wealth management services. So, we help them grow, protect, and ultimately distribute their wealth. And we do that by offering them investment wealth management services. That's the quick version.
So as we've talked in the past, your migration to the U.S. Took a pretty interesting turn. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's right. We're going to talk about that. Well, I think we could categorize this segment under ignorance is bliss and the mother of adventure would be the way we could entitle this segment. It never dawned on me that I could ever possibly immigrate to the United States. And it all came about as a result of meeting the founder of One Capital Management when I was on vacation in Malibu. Malibu became a go-to place for me and my family. And I met Don McDonald, the founder of One Capital. We were socializing in Malibu, and he came up to me and told me how much he didn't think of my favorite hockey team. In no uncertain terms. That was a great introduction. But we got to talking and I didn't really think too much about what he did for a living. We were just kind of socializing. A couple months later, I'm back in my office in North York, Ontario, and I'm reading this article written by Nick Timmeros in the Wall Street Journal about how Chuck Schumer, who we all know is a senator, and Mike Lee, a senator as well, Republican and Democrat and Republican, came up with an idea of creating a new visa status for immigrants who buy real estate. And I read this article. And I'm going, I wonder how Don moved to the United States. Was the first thing that came to my mind. So I contacted him. And that led to him and me discovering, didn't know it until then, that him and I were in the same business. In fact, he was with one of my competitor companies in Canada before he moved to the US. So we kept the conversation going. He ultimately, and it wasn't maybe that conversation, but a couple more conversations, he said, look, if you'd like to come down here and live, you can come work with us. We don't have a Canadian financial advisor in our firm. And, you are one, and you could come down here and be our cross-border financial advisor. So, Julio, that's how this all started. But then is the immigration part. And, the thing that I've learned about immigration law in the U.S. is that it is an art, not a science.
Yeah.
And your success, your outcome has a lot to do with who you have as an immigration attorney. Right? It's not a commoditized thing that you can go to Walmart or buy on Amazon. Immigration advice. It's very, very, you got to get the right person. So the first immigration attorney we had, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, I guess. Some interesting adventures to start with. I had to give my wife, Susan, credit in that she came up with the idea of, we need to do immediately immigrate because our kids were 14 and 11 years old. It was April 2012, and we needed to get our kids in school in Malibu in August. So my wife, as I say, took a bullet for the family, and she enrolled in courses at Santa Monica College, which got her an F1 visa. So we thought, well, we're all set. She got her visa. So, I literally sold my business, sold our house, sold everything, right down to the car, and had our van, and we hit the border at, Sarnia, Ontario, and Huron, Michigan, and went in with our immigration documents. And the person who was looking over our documents, he looks at me and said, these are perfect. And I went, right on, great. He says, where's the rest of them? And I went, the rest of what? And he said, well, the ones for you and the two kids. Hers are perfect. Where are the rest of them? And I'm going, I don't know what you're talking about. He says, well, you've got 6 months and then you got to go back. You can't stay. I'm like, oh, no. So this immigration attorney that was supposedly giving me advice, he had sent to me as we were going up to the border, let me know how it goes. So back in the van now, I'm not quite as excited as we were before. We got out of the van thinking this is it, we're going to be in. So I texted him back and I said, told him what happened. And I'll never forget the line. I wish I somehow could screenshot. That was a BlackBerry. I don't think BlackBerry screenshotted or anything. He says, well, I guess you're going to Tijuana. And Julio, that's where I ended up. Me and my family, 2 weeks later, Susan, my wife, had to go back to Santa Monica College and say, oh, by the way, there's a husband and 2 kids. And we had to get what was called she had an F1 visa. We needed F2 visas, what they were called. So we went to the border, crossed or parked it was in San Ysidro, California. We parked our van and walked over into Mexico. And the lineup to get our paperwork approved. Well, the lineup, we got there at 10 a.m. It was 2:30 p.m. before we got in front of somebody to get our paperwork processed. So it was a 4.5 hour long line. It was quite the experience, I'll tell you that. So I have a question for you. I want you to see if you can guess this. Guess how much it cost in U.S. dollars to process each of mine, my wife, and my 2 kids' immigration F2 documents, visa documents. I want to see if you can guess how much it cost to process those, each one of them. There were 3. One for me.
Things were very different 13 years ago. So I will take a stab at about $500 a piece.
$500 a piece. You're slightly off. Each one of those documents, and they were the people that were in that office. They were they had this down to us, art, science, whatever. They were organized, and we needed to produce in order to get this done. And there was no change available. 2 $1 bills for each one of these documents. I kid you not. two one US dollar bills for each, $6 for all three. And away we go. We walked back across the border to our van with our visa. But that was just to get us into the country. So, my two children could go to Malibu High, starting the school season. I don't have my visa yet. That took, with the help of my friends here at One Capital, until the following next May. So this is, summer 2012, May 23rd, I think it was, 2013, I had my E2 visa. The problem with an E2 visa, for anyone who has any interest in this sort of thing, is that it's a great visa if you want to start a business, which is what I was doing. And it allows your spouse to work as well. They could do any job, literally anything. The person with the visa has to work in the business. There's no
right.
The spouse can do any work. They can work, anywhere from, In-N-Out Burger to, CEO of a corporation or anywhere in between. But children can't work. Doesn't matter. No part-time jobs at In-N-Out Burger or anywhere else. Nothing. And in fact, if we don't have permanent residency by the time they are 21, they have to go back to Canada in this case. So the next question is, how do we get permanent residency, which is a green card? I'm sure folks have heard of those things. And again, E2 does not, there's no pathway to permanent residency. And the immigration attorney I had no real good ideas about how to figure that out for me in my particular situation, other than something called an EB-5 visa. But EB-5 visa is an investor visa, and if you invest $500,000 for 5 years into a business, they will give you a green card. So as long as you keep 10 people employed for the entire time, it's all managed by a third party. But if you have that in place for 5 years, the business is intact and employed consistently for 10 people for 5 years, in you go, and you get your whatever's left of the 500,000 back. And it's usually, you maybe make the equivalent of, 2% a year, maybe. You may break even. Well, I had an issue because I had owed Canada Revenue Agency, which is the Canadian version of the IRS, a significant amount of money when I sold my business. So I had to decide between an EB-5 and pretty much paying the government of Canada. So I decided, I think we better pay our taxes. And we'll go through the E2 investor route and, pray and figure out how this is going to work out. So for the longest time, I was like, got to figure this out. And finally, I ran into an immigration attorney in who's John Perry. I'll give John a plug. He deserves one for sure. Him and his partner, Kate Alsner. I told John one time, I said, John, if I was still making babies, I'd name one after you for what he did for us. Because anyway, I met him for coffee. This is about 2016. So I got introduced. Hey, Wayne, you should meet this immigration attorney. He works with Canadians. I thought, good guy to meet, since I work with Canadians, right, coming to the U.S. So we have coffee over in Encino, California, not far from his office. And he says, well, how did you get here anyway? And I told him the abbreviated version and told him that I was told that the only way I could get into the country and become a permanent resident is through this EB-5. And he looked at me and he went like this. That's not true. I've got lots of people, green cards, that didn't do EB-5. And you could hear that sound right there? Did you hear that? That was the sound of my jaw hitting the table. Because I've been for 4 years thinking I've got to do EB-5, right? Well, John said no. That was in July, I think, of 2016. October 31st, Halloween Day, 2017, myself, my wife, my two kids were in his office collecting our green cards. And happy to announce, with John's help again, in September for my kids and my wife, and early October for me, we became U.S. citizens.
Awesome. Congrats.
Yay. But it was a process, not an event, right, Julio? It wasn't like I think the term is circumlocucious route, we'll call it.
And, that is a lot of what, as business owners we deal with, right? It's that circuitous path that, we think we're going from point A to point B, and all of a sudden we're taking a detour to Europe.
You better be prepared to pivot.
So
right?
tell me a little bit about how you've built basically a business within a business, and some of the complexities to all of this currency change and being in the US and versus being in Canada and other currency, how you help your customers with all of that.
Okay. Well, let's start, if you don't mind, if I would go back to my time in Canada just for a
Sure.
couple minutes. So I started in financial services back in, I can tell you the date, October 6th, 1994. I was definitely in that office, the low man on the totem pole, if there was such a thing. My job was to make phone calls and schedule appointments for at the time, my boss. And basically my job was to call companies and get them to agree to meet with him to talk about lunch and learn seminars. That was my first job. I remember when he told me the job description, I asked him, and you're going to pay me for that? Because to me, Julio, think about this. Do you get paid to look for work? Think about this for a second. Do you get paid to look for work? No. You look for work and you get paid, right? Well, he was paying me to look for work. So I thought, you're going to pay me for that? He said, oh, yeah, I can't find anybody that will stick around for more than a couple of weeks. I thought, well, that's easy. Well, I was right. That was in October, right? 1994. By the following July, I had my own office and he gave me a sports car to drive. I was called a director of marketing. I went from, at the time, Julio, this is back in the 90s. I'm all like gray haired and all that now. Back then, I probably could have passed for, maybe bass guitar player for a grunge band at the time. I'll show you some pictures the next time I see you. So he was kind of like this guy. Apparently, when we did the interview, he walked out and went into the office of the person that recommended me and said, 2 weeks and get him out of here. That was how he thought of me.
Yeah. And you turned that around.
That guy's name is Chris Reynolds. He is the founder of IPC Financial Network in Canada. At the time, we were like a little one-office boutique. It is now a $46 billion broker-dealer. And he mentored me from that. Eventually, he sold his practice to me. So I helped him build up all the clients. I helped him, not every client. He got his own. He didn't need me, but I helped him. So the joke is, when I bought the practice back, he bought a ranch up in north of Toronto. He told me the last time I saw him, he has a place in South Beach. So we had lunch over there one day. I was visiting. And he said, you know what I called the ranch, Wayne? I said, no, what do you call the ranch? He said, I call it Wayne's World. Because the money you gave me when I sold you my business is how I paid for that ranch. Pretty cool. So he taught me, he mentored me on how to become a financial advisor and told me right away, one of the first things he said, listen, you never worry about how you get paid, because if you take care of your clients, you'll be taken care of. Don't. Your job is to give advice, not to collect commissions.
Yeah.
So he taught me all about the importance of preparing a financial plan for your clients. He told me about the importance and showed me, didn't just tell me, he showed me. He said, you used to tell me, Wayne, give a man for a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man how to fish, feed him for a lifetime.
Absolutely.
Right. So he mentored me and taught me how to become a financial planner, and gave me clients initially just get me going, and then eventually ended up taking over the operation. But there's a few things he taught me about the importance of putting a financial plan together for your clients. Capital forecasting. Every family's biggest concern is, are we going to have enough money? So capital forecasting is kind of important. On the investing side, and I'm not going to get too into the weeds, I don't want to put everybody to sleep, but there is a methodology to investing wisely to ensure that people will achieve their financial goals. And the term I'll use is strategic asset allocation. It means simply that you have a set allocation of equities and bonds. And as long as you maintain that over a long period of time, and it's agreed upon at the beginning, this is a great approach, you stick to it, clients will achieve their goals. As long as they adhere to the plan, that means accumulating and saving and all the things that we talk about. And of course, time passes, things change, you have to make adjustments. But that approach has worked. And that's one of the few hills in this lifetime I've had that I will die on. So he taught me, in addition to becoming a financial advisor, was that as a financial advisor, I had to plan. So I could show it to you next time again we get together if you want to see it. I have almost every business plan that I created going back to the late 90s. And basically, I just kept updating it, creating business plans for the next 3 years, where I'm going to be, what type of clients I want to work with, what they'll have to be like, how am I going to, and what are my main activities? For a business owner, I'll say right now, one of the biggest challenges that business owners have is time management.
Absolutely.
Their inability, they want to have a $500 career, right? A $500 hour career, right? But unfortunately, most of them do $20 an hour work because they just can't let go.
Yeah.
They can't delegate. So the thing that I learned early on was that I had to find out what were the three main activities that generate most of my revenue. And I had to spend 80% of my time doing those three activities.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of it had to be delegated.
Absolutely.
So I had in Canada, Julio, I had my own practice. I literally paid for everything down to the paper clips. I had my own bookkeeper, had my own CPA for myself and my business. I had all my staff, everybody. I cut the checks for everybody. And one day I was driving to work one day. This isn't going to impress too many people, but I did it myself. I remember I was on my way into the office, and I was doing a mental head count of how many people I was supporting directly. And it was like 29 people that were indirectly. I was, my paychecks had to, in one way or another, touch them.
Sure.
Including the housekeepers and the personal bookkeeper and everybody, So yeah, I had a business plan, and so I followed that business plan. And every Christmas time in December, I lived in Canada, and so north of Toronto was a little town called Honey Harbor, Ontario. That's where my in-laws lived. We used to go up there every Christmas, and while the family members would be upstairs, celebrating Christmas or having fun watching, the latest Christmas movie, I'd be in the basement. I don't think you have basements in Florida, do you, Julio? I was in the basement in this place, updating my business plan. It became almost like a rite of passage or something that happened every year. And so I kept on doing it. And the one I created in, I think it's 2009, I hit those numbers right on the button in 2012 when I sold that business and moved to Malibu. Right. And I built a team, trained them. And my philosophy on this, I don't know if you talk to people, there's two different ways, especially in wealth management. I think two different ways you can run your business in terms of your team, your personnel. There are other colleagues of mine who, for lack of a better word, would was it churn and burn? You know what I mean? They basically kept them for a while, and there would always be all this turnover. They kept their costs down, but they were constantly having to retrain people.
Yeah.
I, on the other hand, for better, for worse, for richer, for poor, I decided to take a different approach. I decided I wanted to keep the people. I wanted to train them, and I didn't want them to leave. So, to a fault, I probably paid them a little bit more than the industry standard would have suggested. But they never left, and I didn't have to train them, and I didn't have to tell them what to do. And, I had a business. When you have a business is when you can go away for a month and come back, and it's still there. Right. They say if you can't go away for a month and your business is still there, you don't have a business. You have a job. Right? Would you agree with me on that one?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things, I tell each of my customers, you have to be able to empower. And it's not just, here are the keys. It's give them the training, give them the standard operating procedures, all of those things for them to be able to continue to operate the business in your absence. Because yes, it's great to be able to go away, for a month on vacation. But what if you're in the hospital? What if, something, there's a sick child? I mean, so many things can go wrong, and, you need to be able to step away, and not being able to do that. It's a critical error that many business owners make.
Yeah, I was really proud. We built that practice up, and again, I had this opportunity to come to the U.S. Now, a couple things. I will say this. I'm sure this is going to be heard by folks all over, that if the people who bought my practice had just run it the way I run it, it would have been better for everybody. I'll leave it at that. So I come down here to California. I'm joining One Capital Management, and here's the you ever heard of the difference between the rude awakenings and spiritual awakenings? So the reality of it is, and it's still true to this day, and I couldn't be happier. In fact, I was telling our president, Pat Bowen, just a couple of weeks ago that I'm probably having more fun now than I ever have. And part of it is the fact I get to come to Florida and see you. Every couple, 3 months we get to work together. My world has expanded beyond belief, because when I had my practice in Toronto, I mean, you took a compass, you could draw a circle around the greater Toronto area, you covered almost 97% of my clients.
Yeah.
Where now my clients are literally all over the United States, all over Canada, and all over the United States, including South Florida, right? And Central Florida, never mind. Yeah, all over. And on, Naples. So I have clients literally, and so I'm all over the country now. I meet people all over the place. And, but here's the thing. I do not own One Capital Management. I'm one of many team members. We have a firm now when I joined, we weren't this size, but now we're a company of over 100 people. We manage, it'll be, I think the official AUM right now is about 8.3 billion dollars, and anticipating we're in the process of completing an acquisition, and I think they'll push us over 9 billion before the end of the year. So I'm one of many, on a team here. So I think the big learning curve for me is, I basically run my own practice to a certain extent, obviously my clients, and I do all the things I did back in Canada, but, I don't have anybody, I'm not paying for the paper clips anymore, Julio. But everything else is the same, including in my business plan. Can we give a shout out to somebody that we both know?
Go for it.
You know who I'm going to talk about, I think. My good friend, Mary Angelica Alvarado.
Yeah.
Luminary Catalyst. So that is one great lady. I'll say that right now.
Yep, absolutely.
So her and I think, I don't know how long ago it was, but anyway, she came up with this relationship mapping strategy for how to identify who you should be spending time with. And we've been working on that. But she is incredibly intuitive. And we're looking at some ideas on how to even make me more productive. And I told her, I said I would be prepared to be the student. And hopefully she won't need therapy when this is all said and done. But she's been great, and I really enjoy working with her. I know you know her, and she's awesome.
No, she absolutely is, and what I'll say about that is that as long as you've been in business, you're still open to improvement, which again is something that a lot of founders and leaders aren't, because they think they know everything, and that is an unfortunate take.
You know what I like not being? I like not being the smartest guy in the room. I like a room full of people who I know more than I do, helping me move me along.
Absolutely.
I don't have any. I've been very lucky. I'm to some degree successful. I mean, depending on what measuring stick you want to have. But yeah, I would say I cannot take. I have I've had inspiration and I've had intuition, And I guess if I had any God-given gift, it would be that, I'm an executor. I execute ideas. A lot of people I'm sure a lot of people that have a lot of brilliant ideas that if they did them, boy, oh boy, right, they'd be successful. Well, I'm the guy that gets the bright idea and I implement it. Like the podcast I have, 3 Questions with Wayne Baxter, where you're going to be a guest on pretty soon.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that, or even little things. Did I ever tell you about the fish bowls?
No.
Okay, I can still remember it. The moment I was in my car driving to my office in Mississauga, Ontario. You'll have to look that one up on a map. It's the outskirts of Toronto. And Chris, my mentor, he calls me out of nowhere. He says, "Hey, Wayne, there's this financial advisor in Utah. I heard about this guy who actually put fish bowls in the local dry cleaner and restaurant and offered them free dry cleaning and a meal or something, a dinner for 2, if you put your card in the fish bowl." Guess what I did? I went out and bought a couple fish bowls and put them out and put a little thing on it. And basically the idea is you let it fill up for a month and then you go back and pick up the cards and then make some phone calls. Well, when this all got out in my office, this is all the other people in the office, I could hear the walls are pretty thin. Everybody was laughing, going, "Oh my God, this guy." Well, guess what? I got clients. I called those people and developed a bit of a script, and people called back a lot. And sure enough, I got some great clients. And so you see, to a fault, I've always believed that if one is good, 1,000 is better.
Yep. And
it's gotten me into a lot of trouble. I'll say that right now. But
one of the things I'm sure they didn't realize that it wasn't about the fishbowl; it was about the follow-up.
Bingo, bing, bing, bing. It's just in. So guess what happened? It didn't take me long to figure out that if 2 fish bowls are okay, 8 is better. So I started with 8, but then it became a bit of a pain. They got broken. People forgot, and it got. So I got a bright idea. I said, what if I were to hire somebody to put out 50 and have them basically, their full-time job is putting out 10 fish bowls a week for 5 weeks and then going back the next 5 weeks and collecting the cards and calling people. Guess what? That's what I did. And it worked. And that person I hired, she went from being driving around the greater Toronto area collecting fish bowls and collecting business cards to becoming my client services person, to becoming a financial planner, CFP, RFP, I think, or PFP. Get this. Oh, I told you about this. I hosted a radio show in Toronto for 8 years.
Okay.
And I taught her how to be a radio show host. I can remember the first couple episodes, you could hear her having small heart attacks. It was pretty funny. Leanne McGannerty, she was great. She is great. So Leanne basically came along for the ride. And when I got the radio show, it was me and another guy, Gerardo. We did it for a while. Then I did it for the rest of the time myself for most of the time. And I helped build my practice with the radio show. Live every Sunday morning, 8 to 10 a.m. called right on the money on AM 740 in Toronto.
So Wayne, I know one of the things that you do with your, at least your new clients, is your cross-border audit. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this applies, I'll say right now, what I'm going to talk about applies to domestic clients as much as it does cross-border, but it definitely applies. So conducting discovery, I guess attorneys do that, obviously, but you have to conduct a discovery. So for me, what I do for every family, this particular cross-border families, is you have to gather a lot of information from them. And what makes it interesting is that they have, a client here in the U.S., whether they're in South Florida, Southern California, where we are, or wherever in the U.S., they have, tax returns, they have investment statements, insurance, they have expenses, Well, if you're a cross-border client, and you have Social Security, right? Social Security benefit. Well, if you're a cross-border client, say you're 55, 60 years old and you're now living in, Boca Raton, Florida. Well, you're going to have potentially Social Security benefits, hopefully. Makes life a lot easier if you do.
Mm-hmm.
But you're also going to have something called Canada Pension Plan and Old Age Security, which is the Canadian version of government benefits. So you have that, and then you have, you may have an IRA down here or a revocable trust. Well, in Canada, you may have something called a Registered Retirement Savings Plan, or RRSP. And you may have life insurance in Canada. You may have life insurance in the US, right? So when we do an audit, as you called it, we get all this information. But the big thing I get everybody to do, and it tells me if people are serious. I have a document that I've been using, believe it or not, for 25 years. And it was given to me by a colleague of mine back at IPC, Mike Hoberlin. Mike, if you're listening to this or seeing this, hello, gave me this spreadsheet that I turned into what I call an expense and income planner. And it's a spreadsheet that basically allows people to kind of outline what they're spending on household expenses, transportation expenses, on food, medical costs, and discretionary spending. What they spend on bank charges, what they pay on, covering pits, childcare, et cetera, et cetera. So the starting point is not just, all these tax returns and all these investment statements, but also thing I'm most interested in is, what do you guys spend money on every month? And once you have all that information and get an understanding of what they're hoping to achieve, then we can get to working on envisioning how they will spend money 3, 5, 7, 10, 15, 20 years from now. And once we have that information, guess what we can then create?
Nice.
We can put together an investment strategy for them. Anybody who tries to do that beforehand is getting the cart before the horse. So there you go. That's how it works.
One of the things, and we've seen this a lot in TV advertising and just talking to people, is the incredible expense of these recurring subscription plans. How much are you seeing that come up, in these, audits, things that, your customers have no idea they were still paying for?
Well, that's when we find out about them. I'll tell you that much. And some of them are valid, and some of them they decide they don't need them anymore. But yeah, what I find is interesting, though, Julio, is the fact that people forget what they're spending money on.
Absolutely.
Not just subscription plans, or we go through and we do all detailed, right? And then after the fact, they come back and, well, we didn't factor in this, we didn't factor in that. Oh, the other thing that happens is expenses change. I was talking to a client of mine yesterday that live in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, a couple from Canada that I work with, and they had a budget for their kids after school program, and the rules changed, and their expense, their budget went from, I guess, less than $100 a month to $1,500.
Ouch.
Yeah. So things change, right? Now, the funny thing of it is, we had budgeted it in as a straight line. We had assumed it was going to be in place. And then there were some other expenses we had that they didn't keep going. So it kind of works itself out. And somebody got a raise too, which helped things out a bit. But yeah, I mean, this is why reviews are so important in the world of what I have. You can't just put together a plan, congratulations, see you later, nice talk to you. You need to connect with them. I like, 2-3 times a year, I like to get back and just go over everything, all the expenses, and see how we're doing. If you just meet once a year, people will forget why they even hired you.
Yep.
Right?
And you've got to do that plan. You've got to do that audit, both at a personal level and at a business level.
100%.
Because
I think much of that's super important.
On one and not on the other, and they fail.
And so here's I'm sure you've heard this. Those who fail to plan to fail.
Absolutely.
Right. So if you're a business owner and you don't have a business plan for your business, and what I conclude is that you probably have a personal financial objectives too. So probably a good idea would be to make sure that you have those figured out in conjunction with a business plan.
Yep.
Right. You should basically make sure that they kind of at least align or at some point intersect.
So Wayne,
they don't.
So Wayne, as you know, no one leaves the show without providing some actionable tips to our listeners that they can implement today to positively impact their business. So what do you have for our listeners?
Well, I guess the first one I would have to say, and I will make this comment, and I think I'm still accurate. I would say that of the folks that are listening to your podcast or watching it now, I will bet you that no more than 20% have a written financial plan. So my first recommendation is to get one, for sure. And that financial plan should, and I guess the other thing I would say is, you meet people sometimes they have 2 or 3 or 4 financial advisors, and they're not a family office. They don't have $100 million, and they think somehow they're diversifying their risk. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, folks, if you have 2 or more financial advisors, you have 2 or 3 people that you don't trust. So hire a financial advisor that you trust and give them the ability to put together a plan that will work for you. So have a plan, hire somebody you trust would be my 1 and 2. And remember what we said just a minute ago about those who fail to plan to fail.
Yep, absolutely. And for those that are creating plans on their own, review your plans on a regular basis, at least on a quarterly basis. Review your plan. What have you done? What have you not done? What did you accomplish or not? Because that absolutely
hire experts. That will be my other one. Do it yourselfers, man.
No, you're going to get yourself in trouble.
I don't recommend being a do-it-yourselfer. Humility is accepting one's limitations. So be a little humble. Admit that you don't know everything.
Yeah.
Hire an expert.
So thank you so much, Wayne, for sharing with us your very interesting journey into the U.S. There were, plenty of learning opportunities there, primarily around, responding to change. Because that's the one thing that I boiled out of our whole conversation. You had to deal with so much change, so many challenges, and being able to respond to those in an effective manner, just reinforced your ability to be successful. For our listeners, if your wealth plan feels fragmented or overly complex, take Wayne's advice, conduct that audit, and start asking hard questions. That's how you move from stuck to truly scalable wealth. Thanks for tuning in to From Stuck to Scaled, and I will see you next time. Thank you, Wayne.
Julio, great seeing you. Thanks a lot for the opportunity to chat with you. Great.
Awesome.
You've been listening to From Stuck to Scaled, growth strategies for small and mid-sized businesses, produced by Optocution LLC. For more information, tools, and resources, check out our website www.redefinepossible.co/podcast.